Hello and good morning. Rescue teams have been working through the night in Turkey and Syria, desperately hoping to reach survivors still trapped beneath flattened concrete and twisted metal. More than 4,000 people are now known to have died, with that number expected to rise significantly. And with whole neighbourhoods destroyed, many thousands more are injured and homeless in freezing conditions. Now, in Syria, the earthquake is being described as a crisis within a crisis, a disaster inflicted on a population already traumatised by 12 years of war. These are the latest live pictures coming into us from the Turkish city of Diyarbakir, a city of 1 million people where hundreds of buildings have been entirely destroyed by the earthquake, neighbourhoods flattened, and the rescue effort, as you can see, continues apace to try and find anyone who may well be alive beneath the rubble. Now, the first earthquake, with a magnitude of 7.8, struck at 17 minutes past 4 on Monday morning, about 20 miles from the city of Gaziantep, close to Turkey's border with Syria. There were dozens of aftershocks, and then 9 hours later, at 24 minutes past 1 in the afternoon, a second huge quake measuring 7.5 was recorded at Pazarcik in the province of Kahramanmaraş. The worst affected areas are all along the East Anatolian fault line. Now, in Diyarbakir and in cities all across the region, including Şanlıurfa, Osmaniye, Antakya, rescue crews, some specialists, some just local people desperate to help, have been spending the past 24 hours since these earthquakes struck, combing through the wreckage of buildings to try and find anyone that may have survived. The Turkish government said that there were some 15,000 people who've been injured. That number is certain to rise in the coming days as we see the scale of the devastation. Hundreds of thousands have been made homeless, of course, and have been put up in local buildings such as universities, dormitories and other large facilities. Now, at the moment, the death toll stands at some 4,700, but that number is certain to rise. The Turkish government says that 15,834 have been injured, but the real figure is still unknown. Now, many nations all around the world, including the UK, the US, the Netherlands, Croatia, have been sending specialist teams after Turkey appealed for international assistance. And these pictures are from Istanbul airport from yesterday, where hundreds, thousands of people turned up to volunteer with the country's disaster response agency, ready to be sent wherever they may be needed. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, who's joining us now from Istanbul. Good morning to you, Siobhan. So just bring us the latest as we understand it in terms of the rescue effort and what's been happening in the past day.
Well, you've seen those pictures there of crowds of people heading to airports in Turkey trying to offer their support and anything they can do to help those who've been affected by these quakes. And also international aid starting to come as well. But still, because of the widespread damage, particularly here in Turkey, there are some communities which are saying they simply do not have the equipment they need at the moment to get people out below the rubble. People saying that they can hear voices, but they cannot get through that. And the freezing conditions making the situation even more difficult as the window to free survivors following these apocalyptic quakes closes. Slowly, inch by inch, the trapped are released. Survivors pulled from the rubble in southern Turkey. When darkness fell, efforts continued under torchlight, each passing hour making the chance of finding people alive more unlikely. Across the border in Syria, a similar scene. Already scarred by a decade of war, the city of Idlib was poorly equipped to find those trapped under concrete.
فما وصلنا عند باب البناية إلا كان قلبت علينا البناية كلها. الله الحامي قلب علينا باب الخشب، هو اللي حمانا الله والباب الخشب، والحمد لله رب العالمين. هلا أولادي ثلاثتهم هون والبنت الصغيرة الحمد لله ما فيها شيء طاول.
The damage from Monday's mega quakes is still being revealed. The first, measuring 7.8, struck Gaziantep in eastern Turkey.
followed hours later by a massive 7.5 tremor. A double blow, twisting and mangling once thriving cities. Some of the wounded have been taken on military planes for treatment in Istanbul. Hundreds of volunteers have gathered at the airport. 45 nations have offered help. The next 24 hours will be crucial. But with temperatures dropping below zero in some areas, the battle to save lives will become even harder.
Well, we know following massive earthquakes like this, the first 24 to 48 hours are critical for getting survivors out alive. But those freezing conditions aren't just putting those stuck under the rubble at extra risk. It's also people who've managed to escape from their houses. We know that thousands of buildings have collapsed. Many people are either sleeping in their cars or, even more dangerously, having to huddle together on the streets. They are now at risk of exposure as the freezing temperatures continue.
And Siobhan, as you mentioned, the weather in the earthquake zone is very cold, very difficult for the rescue teams to work in, and of course difficult for those people who've lost their homes. And the efforts to try and help them is coming from all over the country. And I know that people have been driving from all over, from Istanbul where you are, to try and assist in any way they can. Are you getting any sense of how it's being organised at this point yet?
Well, we know that 45 nations have offered support. We know, for example, the UK is sending more than 70 rescue teams. They're sending some dogs. They're sending specialist equipment that will allow rescue teams here alongside the UK to look beneath the rubble and also to cut up the concrete that might be trapping people below. And then, of course, as you say, we've seen these pictures of people going to airports, people living in the city here, trying to offer support, offer aid, donate clothes, do whatever they can to help those who have either been left homeless or are still stranded.
OK, Siobhan, for now in Istanbul, do appreciate that. Thank you. Now, in the last half an hour, we spoke to our correspondent John Sparks, who managed to make it to Osmaniye in Turkey. He sent us this report.
I think an absolutely typical scene here in this city of 250,000, about 150 miles from the epicenter of the earthquake. We're on one of the main boulevards in this city. It's called Musa Shahir Boulevard. And what has happened here is that the earthquake has brought down some buildings. Others have been left standing. Let's go and we don't want to get in the rescuers' way here. Let's just have a bit of a look here. What they've done is brought in a couple of diggers. They are working on the remains of an apartment building. They are taking rubble out from the side, and what some of the rescuers told us was that they heard voices overnight. They think there may be up to 15 people in the rubble. Let's come around again and have a look. I know the sun, we are fighting the sun here a little bit. You can see they're trying to remove rubble from this site. Very difficult. They've got two diggers now working here. They think up to 15 people underneath the rubble. But what we've got here is a sort of do-it-yourself collection of people. City workers, we've got members of the fire department, but no specialist fire and rescue, no specialist search and rescue officials. They're doing it themselves. And here on the other side, we've got some people with relatives who were in the building itself. Very emotional scenes a little bit earlier. You can see people here on the side waiting for news of loved ones, friends who were inside this building the last time that they saw them. Should we move around again? Let's have a look. I mean, they're working with real speed now. And I think the feeling here is they've got to do something. It's very cold. Temperatures sub-zero at night. It's very cold still. Okay, we're just going to move back. We're being asked to move back a little bit by the organisers here. Yes, understand. Thank you. They're doing their best, but it is an emergency situation, but it's not being done by emergency workers. There's people here from the fire department. They're doing the best they can. They don't have the search and rescue personnel with their specialist equipment. For example, the heat tracking equipment that they use to try and locate people under the rubble. So they're doing the best that they can. And that really is the situation in this city as a whole. Some buildings have been brought down, others haven't. But really, the local authorities have been overwhelmed by this at the moment.
John, as we're watching your reporting, we can see that those guys there in the hard hats seem to be local council officials, as you mentioned, not specialist teams at all. And we often see that after the rubble is cleared away, that people try and move in with a more close search. But you seem to be saying that, and it seems to be from the pictures that we're seeing, that they're trying to clear as much of the debris as possible because the building further back, they believe that they have heard people who are trapped beneath it. Just describe for us the area, because you say that building's come down. Are the other buildings nearby, are they still standing?
That's right. I mean, it is seemingly random how the earthquake has destroyed some buildings and left others in seemingly perfect condition. And I mean, this site here, I'm going to ask my colleague Olivia to pan back to the building. There's an apartment building tucked between two others with a very large pile of rubble behind it, and we are fighting the sun a little bit to film this. And what they are doing is they've got these two diggers now at work, and they are trying to clear the rubble. The building itself has pancaked on itself. It's come down, it's collapsed. Clearly a decision has been made that the best thing to do now is to remove as much rubble as they can. And it is difficult to see how any person, people trapped underneath that rubble could survive for long under there, particularly in these temperatures. It's a difficult situation for them. Again, they're making decisions on the best available information they have. They don't have search and rescue teams here on site. The personnel here in the red jackets, they are from the local fire department. So they're doing what they can. You can actually see, I can see one or two search and rescue people now on site taking a look. And that is the first time since we've been here. We've been here for about an hour. What we were told from one person was that there were 4 people, they thought, trapped underneath the rubble. We were told by several others that there were up to 15. They heard voices overnight. They heard voices, but they haven't been able to get those people out. And you know, you can see why. I mean, I'm looking at 10, 12 meters of rubble, of slabs of concrete collapsed in on themselves. It's difficult to see how anybody would survive the collapse of a building like this. Very, very difficult. But, you know, they're going to try. They're here. They need help, clearly. And you've got people on the other side of the street desperate for news. I mean, absolutely desperate. There are people, women on the other side, crying as they look on, clearly have friends or loved ones inside this building, and they are waiting for news. And this is the only thing they can do. The only thing they can do is to come here and watch. That must be, you know, just an indescribably awful feeling.
Yes, John, absolutely helpless, those people on the other side of the street there. And you mentioned you've been there for about an hour. I wonder if you've had a chance to speak to anyone over there, and have they told you what's been happening for the past day?
Just the briefest of conversations, and we got the immediate sense that local officials, people who work for the city here, really overwhelmed by the situation. We have stopped on the way into the city on one of the main boulevards that leads to the central square, but off the central square we can see other streets where, again, some buildings are standing, others have completely collapsed on themselves. So I think it's fair to say that they're really struggling with this. I mean, I'm going to follow my colleague Olivia here. I mean, we can see a lot of destruction here. This is just one small part of the city, and they've got diggers here, they've got the equipment, they do have the infrastructure. What they don't have is the specialist personnel to help them deal with this. And we saw them coming in. We flew in last night. We saw search and rescue teams from the Czech Republic, from the Netherlands, from Turkey itself, but they need them here. They need them here quickly.
Reporting there from Osmania. Let's get the latest on what the UK government is doing to help those affected by the earthquakes. I'm joined now by the Foreign Office Minister, Andrew Mitchell. Andrew Mitchell, good morning to you and thanks for being with us. Let's get straight into the UK response. We understand that 76 experts have been sent to Turkey. Have they arrived?
No, they're leaving this morning. They'll arrive in daylight today. They were already at Birmingham Airport to leave last night. But the most important early lesson of this is that the first 72 hours are critical, and that means close coordination with the Turkish authorities, who are themselves highly competent. And what we're sending is 76 specialists with the relevant equipment, with 4 sniffer dogs. They will be operating in daylight today under Turkish command, and I know that they're going to make a very big impact when they get there, along with all the other international and coordinated services that are deployed.
And that coordination is important. Is that why they're leaving today rather than last night, to make sure that it's a joined-up effort once they get in country?
That's correct. I mean, it's closely coordinated with the Turkish authorities. This is an appalling catastrophe in Turkey. Turkey, a country that is very close to Britain and which has also been host to hundreds of thousands of refugees, millions of refugees who have gone there. So Gaziantep is a place I visited a few years ago as part of the Syria relief effort. It's a densely populated area, and the calamitous effects of all of this will be quite extraordinary.
Now, these experts that we're sending, Mr. Mitchell, was that sent off our own back, or was this a direct request? Because, of course, as you know the area. Turkey does have expertise in dealing with this kind of disaster.
No, the first thing we did when the news broke yesterday morning was to speak to the Turkish government to find out what we could do to help. We've learnt a lot of lessons since the earthquake in Haiti, where everyone piled in and the thing didn't work well, the coordination was non-existent. So we've learnt that lesson, and we take our lead purely from the Turkish government. We find out what the Turkish government wants, and we do our very best to supply it. And the Turkish government asked for this support, and that's why we are dispatching the 76 experts and the 4 sniffer dogs, and also deploying an emergency medical team to help with the assessment. But I can't stress enough to your viewers that it is the first 72 hours, we're 24 hours plus into that now. It is the first 72 hours when a coordinated response will save the most lives.
And was that a direct call between Rishi Sunak and President Erdogan?
I think it was between the Foreign Office and the relevant authorities in Turkey. But the Prime Minister has expressed very strong support and has promised that Britain will be there by Turkey's side, helping at this appalling time for the Turkish people.
Yeah, you made that very clear, Mr. Mitchell. I appreciate that. I wonder, what more do you think the UK government can do to help?
Well, what the UK government can do is to respond to the needs that the Turkish government set out, and that is what we're going to do. We stand ready. We're in constant contact with their coordinators and organisers, and we stand ready to help in any way that we can.
Do you have any concerns about the amount of aid that we're able to give, considering the fact that the aid budget has been cut recently?
Well, you're right. The aid budget is under very considerable strain, but Britain always carves out a certain amount to cope with humanitarian crises. That is what people in Britain expect us to do. Britain is always there first and in strength to help when these appalling catastrophes take place, and we will be there this time. And the humanitarian budget is in a way slightly separate from the steady state international development budget, and it is there specifically to respond to crises like these.
So this essentially comes from an emergency fund rather than the sort of overarching foreign aid budget that we have?
No, it's all part of the same budget, but there is within that budget different areas of activity, and the humanitarian activity, as we've seen, for example, in the Horn of Africa with the dreadful drought that threatens so many young lives there. The humanitarian budget is very carefully coordinated and set, and it reacts to the need on the ground. You can never tell at the beginning of the year what humanitarian crises are going to take place, and therefore it has to be a flexible part of what we do.
Yeah, and with the scale of this disaster, Mr Mitchell, and with your calls recently to try and make sure that the aid budget is increased, do you think those calls will be strengthened by what we've seen? I know we're only a day into this disaster.
Well, we are quite deliberately finding ways of boosting the budget. As you say, it was cut back some years ago. It's now at 0.55. It will return to 0.7 when the economic circumstances allow. But we have other ways of sweating what the assets that we use, the money that we deploy. But I want to stress that the humanitarian approach is slightly different because it has to be very elastic, because we never know what humanitarian emergencies will emerge during the course of the year.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, Turkey does have infrastructure to deal with this sort of thing, but of course across the border in northwest Syria there is no infrastructure to deal with that. How is the UK going to be helping that region that has been affected?
Well, you're quite right. The area of northern Syria is right in the centre of all of this tragedy. It's ungoverned space. Part of the problem is it's very difficult to get resources that are now needed across the border from Turkey, partly because Turkey's got its own problems, but also because there's only one crossing place. And we hope that the UN will be able to negotiate additional crossing places. We have supported for many years the White Helmets in Syria, which was a civil defence grouping that helped people who were caught up during the Syrian crisis. And Britain funds them, and we will continue to support them. They are active, we know already, in helping with this dreadful crisis, and Britain will continue to support them.
But to be clear, any aid that goes into northwest Syria will have to come through Turkey, through the Cilvagosua crossing border. You're not planning on bringing aid directly into the northwest of Syria?
It's very difficult to get aid in. We will use anything we can to get aid to people who are desperately needed, and we're talking and closely coordinating with the United Nations. But if you look at the geography, the way in is from Turkey. It's over that border, which is very constricted, and that's an additional problem at a desperate time for people who've already suffered so much in northern Syria.
Thank you for that, Mr Mitchell. I know we don't have much time with you, but I do want to ask you something about domestic politics. Of course, there's a mini reshuffle that's going to be announced in the next few hours. If you were asked to be a chairperson of the party, would you take it?
These are matters way above my pay grade. They're matters for the Prime Minister, but I'm obviously very honoured to be doing the development job in the Foreign Office, and I'm going to get on today and in the days to come focusing on this terrible tragedy in Turkey and Syria.
I appreciate that answer. Not entirely a denial, Mr Mitchell, I'll take it from you, but thank you very much for your time this morning. Andrew Mitchell there.
Thank you.
All right, let's just take you to the latest picture from northwestern Syria. There, as the Foreign Minister, Andrew Mitchell, was reporting, this area has been devastated, of course, hit by 12 years of civil war. Ungoverned spaces, is how Andrew Mitchell described it, not in control of the regime out of Damascus, controlled by rebel groups here. But thousands of people are known to have lost their lives. You can see the state of the devastation. Buildings there that have been bombarded by 12 years of civil war by Russian and Syrian jets, and helicopters now struck by the earthquake. Many buildings that were already damaged, were already fragile, of course, with the earthquake struck, but some new buildings have been put up to try and bring some semblance of life back to those people who are stuck in this area of northwestern Syria, but put up very quickly, and some reports that put up not in exactly internationally compliant ways, thus the resulting devastation that we're seeing in the northwest of Syria. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle, who's joining us from Jerusalem. Alistair, good to have you with us this morning. Let's just pick up on what we were seeing there in northwestern Syria. As Andrew Mitchell was saying there, the only way the UK is going to get aid in is if it goes through Turkey. Turkey's closed that border crossing, so it's going to be difficult to get that help to those in northwest Syria that's needed.
Yeah, I think this is a real problem. I've been speaking to contacts and colleagues of ours in Syria, and they describe a really desperate situation, and one that I think we just don't know the full reality of at the moment. And I mean, if you look at the pictures that are coming out of Turkey, they are mirrored across the border in northwest Syria. And I was listening to John Sparks's report on the ground in Turkey. I mean, the few things he mentioned, for example, the freezing temperatures, particularly overnight. Well, I mean, that is affecting many of the millions of refugees who have been displaced because of the civil war in Syria. So that is very concerning. But also he was making reference to some of the expertise that the Turkish government have on the ground in Turkey through their own resources, but also through international aid. And that's just not getting into Syria. I think it's going to be possible through negotiation to perhaps get humanitarian aid into northwest Syria, so medicine, food, shelters, that kind of thing. And of course, the British government, as one of many governments, including the Americans, Canadians, and others around the world who fund the White Helmets, will probably look to try and channel more money and aid through that route. But what is going to be really difficult is how do you get the expertise in there? And as Andrew Mitchell was saying, the first 72 hours are crucial to try and find anyone who's still alive. But one of the best ways of doing that is using specialist equipment, whether it be sniffer dogs, microphone probes, cameras, heat sensors, that kind of stuff. That needs the individuals who can operate that kind of kit and are experienced and trained in operating that kit to be on the ground and literally in the rubble in order to do that. And, I think it's going to be very hard to negotiate access for them into northwest Syria. And that means the Syrians are alone in this in many ways.
Quickly, while we have you, what's the latest on reports that the Israeli government is going to be sending some help to Syria?
Well, the Israeli government said that they had been asked to send some help, or whether or not they would be prepared to send some help. It wasn't quite clear where that request had come from, but the Israeli government said that they stood ready to do so. It would be an extraordinary turn of events, really, because Syria and Israel are engaged regularly. Well, Israeli jets in particular fly regular bombing missions over Syria, particularly targeting Iranian targets that are operating in Syria. And so to have a humanitarian mission coming from Israel into Syria to help in some way would really be a big sign that other political and security factors are put to one side in order to bring some sort of relief on the ground.
Thank you for that. All right, plenty more to come this morning, including I'll be speaking to the executive director of a charity coordinating support in Turkey. Hello there and welcome back. Our top stories this morning. Rescuers are continuing to search for anyone who is trapped beneath the rubble of collapsed buildings in Turkey and Syria. More than 4,700 people are now confirmed to have died in the earthquakes. As rescuers from around the world begin to arrive in Turkey, including a team of 76 specialists from the UK. Well, our special correspondent Alex Crawford has travelled to close to the epicentre of the earthquake. She sent us this update from Antakya.
Virtually every building here has been affected in some way. If I could show you a 360-degree circle around here, which I can't because the signal is not strong enough, but there are damaged buildings all around me. Behind me was an 8-storey residential building. There are just a few volunteers who are trying to use pickaxes and their bare hands to take out rubble. I'm being told that you can actually see, if we can, we'll try and tentatively turn around here, because on this other building here, they're hearing voices as well. And they try every now and again, they tell us to be quiet so that they can use their small drills, that's all they've got, to try and drill down. There's people shouting on the top of that building. They've already taken out at least 4 corpses this morning, and they're shouting now, saying that they've heard people beneath. A lot of people in this province feel that they have been forgotten, that they haven't received help, that they're still not getting help. We saw crowds of people looting one of the supermarkets, saying that they were hungry, they had nowhere to stay, no homes, no food, and crucially, no help at the moment. We understand that the main government hospital here has been deserted of medical staff. It's partially destroyed. Infrastructure has been affected badly. There are still patients in there. Some of them have been killed by the earthquake. Others have died because they haven't been looked after in the interim since the earthquake. This area is still very vulnerable to aftershocks and further earthquakes, and there have been multiple throughout the whole of the Turkey-Syria region.
Our special correspondent Alex Crawford reporting there from the city of Antakya, and of course we'll bring you all the latest from Turkey and from Syria throughout the morning. But now let's turn to some of the day's other news. And Sky News understands that the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will reshuffle his cabinet later. Changes will be limited, but will include a new chair for the Conservative Party after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked recently over his tax affairs. Let's bring in our political correspondent Tamara Cohen, who joins us now. Tamara, good to have you with us. So we are expecting the reshuffle soon. It's going to be a mini reshuffle, and Andrew Mitchell didn't quite rule himself out of getting that job as chair.
Morning, Kamali. Yes, we are going to get a cabinet reshuffle this morning. Rishi Sunak's first since he came in October. It's not going to be very extensive, but we're going to get a new party chairman. Of course, that position has been vacant since Nadeem Zahawi was sacked just over a week ago. And that is a key role because it is very public facing, but it's also the person who has to prepare the party to fight the next election, which is expected to happen probably towards the end of next year. So he'll need to think hard about who in his cabinet has that campaigning experience and is a good communicator. As a result of that job being appointed, we expect other vacancies to come up, which may need to be filled. We also expect that Rishi Sunak is going to divide up the business and energy department to create a new energy department with its own energy secretary and perhaps merge business with the trade department. Prime ministers are allowed to create any departments they like, and it usually gives us a signal of what they think is important. Rishi Sunak told us during the summer leadership contest last year that Britain's energy independence was a priority for him, and he wanted someone to be in charge solely of working on that, reducing reliance on getting energy from other countries where prices can, of course, fluctuate as a result of events like the war in Ukraine. So we expect some changes like that. As ever with reshuffles, you get winners and losers, and you get people who are very disappointed and may cause problems for you down the track. But Rishi Sunak will, by the time of his next cabinet meeting, which we expect to be later this morning, have a few new faces around his top table.
And when we know who they are, you'll tell us about them tomorrow. For now, thank you very much. Also making news this morning, BP has reported its latest profit results that they've more than doubled to a record £27.7 billion last year. Now, that follows record profits announced by Shell off the back of surging energy prices, driven, of course, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. BP profits, as we said, more than doubled this year to £23 billion. Now, the search for Nicola Bulley is entering its 11th day, and it's including now the use of specialised sonar equipment at the river where she was last seen. The mother of two went missing in St Michael's-on-Wyre in Lancashire. Her partner, Paul Ansell, has issued a fresh appeal through police, saying that Nicola's two daughters desperately miss her. The Treasury and the Bank of England have suggested that the UK should launch a digital pound. It would use technology similar to that used by cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but the currency would be backed by the state and be interchangeable with cash. And the US military says that the Chinese balloon it shot down over the weekend was 200 feet tall, or about the height of a 20-storey building. It also says that the sensor payload underneath was the size of a regional jetliner. The US accuses China of spying with the balloon, but Beijing says it was only monitoring weather patterns. Now, nurses are on the picket lines again today after the NHS staged the biggest strike in the service's history yesterday. Health leaders say people should expect an incredibly disrupted week. Let's bring in our Shaman Freeman pal, who's at a picket line at University College Hospital in central London for us this morning. Good morning to you, Shaman. So the picket line continues and the strike goes on into a second day.
Yes, that's right. More upheaval expected in the NHS today as nurses go on strike for the second time this week. And of course, it follows yesterday, which was the biggest strike action day in the NHS's history. It wasn't just nurses, it was paramedics, ambulance workers, call handlers, and so on that also went on strike. And today we're expecting more disruption as nurses take to the picket lines. They will argue, though, they don't want to be here. They're being forced to the picket lines by the government, as they have also accused the government of being on strike itself after refusing, as far as the nurses are concerned, to get around the negotiation table and discuss pay. Now, nurses had been asking for that 19% pay rise, but had said that they were willing to meet the government halfway on this. One thing they're not prepared to budge on, though, is negotiation for this financial year. They want the financial year of 2022 and 2023 to be negotiated, but the government said that they would rather look to the future, and that 19% that the nurses are asking for is unaffordable. And of course, as I've said, it's not just the nurses that they have to consider. They've got to think about teachers who are striking as well as transportation workers, other civil servants and public sector workers too, all of whom have already been taking strike action or have said that they plan to do so. We have actually heard this morning as well about postal workers and their strike action. They had been planning to walk out on the 16th and 17th of this month, but they've had to call off that strike action because of a legal challenge by Royal Mail. Now, they say that they are still balloting members for strike action in the future, but that strike action on the 16th and 17th has so far been called off. So, as I say, another day of disruption for the NHS and another day that the government is being called on to start negotiating with public sector workers on pay and working conditions.
Shaman, while we have you, and I know you're on a picket line there, and thank you for bringing us the news about those postal workers, but I wonder from the nurses, the healthcare staff that you've been able to speak to, this is the second day of the biggest strikes that is in the history of the NHS. What are they saying to you about the fact that they find themselves still off the wards, still not caring for people, which is the whole reason they went into the profession?
Yeah, well, nurses say that they have been forced to strike, and that's because of pay and because of working conditions. The nurses I've spoken to have said that because of the low pay and the working conditions, that many of their colleagues have been forced into other professions, and that means that for the ones that stay behind, they're facing huge amounts of pressure on their workload. They're having to deal with the understaffing, and on top of that, they say that they've been faced with real-term cuts to their salaries because of a decade of cuts to the NHS. Many of them say that they don't want to be on picket lines. They would rather be dealing with patients. But as it stands, something needs to be done to address not only pay, but the conditions that patients are facing as well. And in terms of the NHS and what it means for the NHS, of course, we're already speaking about this backlog of around 7 million people waiting for operations and appointments. And we've already heard that because of strike action over the last couple of weeks and months, that around 80,000 planned appointments and procedures have been cancelled. Now, NHS leaders are saying that people should still go to their planned appointments if they haven't been told it's been cancelled. But of course, this is huge disruption to the NHS.
OK, Shaman there outside a hospital, thank you very much for that reporting. Let's return now to our top story this morning, and this is the scene of devastation in the city of Kahramanmaraş in the southeast of Turkey, a city of some 1.1 million people. And as you can see, again, buildings entirely flattened by yesterday's huge earthquakes, two major earthquakes at 7.8 magnitude and 7.5, and in between those two major quakes, which was shallow, resulting in all this devastation, there were dozens and dozens of aftershocks. In fact, there was even an earthquake in central Turkey of 5.6 magnitude yesterday. But this is the scene in the southeastern city of Kahramanmaraş. There are many other cities that, of course, have been affected throughout the region. Sanlifa and Takia, where Alex Crawford is, Osmania, where John Sparks was reporting from this morning, and all report a similar scene of devastation and people now, just about 24 hours on from the initial quake, trying desperately to bring anyone out alive from collapsed buildings. Well, governments and aid organisations from all around the world have been rushing to provide assistance as rescue teams race to find survivors who may well be trapped in Turkey and Syria. Let's bring in now Evren Aydoğan, co-founder of the Turkish charity that coordinates the supply in times of crisis, Needs Map. Evren Aydoğan, thank you very much for being with us. Just tell us, I understand that you are in Adana. Tell us about the situation where you are.
Actually, I am right now in Antakya. Yesterday, we were as a team in Adana. Adana is considerably in a better condition, with more field one. There are lots of needs for rescue still. So the situation is can you hear me?
Evren, yes, and I will apologise to viewers. I'm sure there'll be understanding of the fact that connections via telephones are quite difficult at this time. Is a disaster area. You said that you're in Antakya. Alex Crawford is in that city as well. She showed us pictures of many collapsed buildings. What have you seen this morning as you've been there? I apologise. Evren. I don't think we can stick with this line. Obviously, it's entirely understandable that there's difficulty in keeping the connection. If we can establish it in a better way, we'll come back to you. But thank you very much, Evren Aydoğan from Needs Map. And best of luck in all your work. Thank you. Now, as we continue our coverage of yesterday's two major quakes, there are reports of yet another earthquake, a magnitude 5.7 earthquake in the east of Turkey. That's according to seismologists. 5.7 magnitude, not nearly as big as those ones from yesterday, but still significant, and shows that the seismic activity in and around this region continues. The East Anatolian fault line was the line where the major earthquakes happened yesterday, a slip strike causing all this devastation. But now another earthquake has been recorded, 5.7 magnitude. It's only just happened, so of course we get more detail of any damage that's been caused by that. We'll bring it to you as soon as we can. Now, the challenges facing efforts to help people affected by the earthquakes in Syria continue and compound. I'll be speaking to the head of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent after this short break. Hello there and welcome back. You're watching Sky News and our continuing live coverage of the earthquake that's affected both Turkey and Syria. This is the latest camera that we have positioned in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir as the rescue effort there continues. The Turkish government saying that more than 4,700 people are now known to have died as a result of those earthquakes. And in the last half an hour, a third earthquake has been recorded of 5.6 magnitude in the east of Turkey. More details on that to come. 5.7, sorry, magnitude. More details on that to come as we get them. But the rescue effort has continued all through the night and well into this morning, as some 15,000 people are now known to have been injured. Turkish government also telling us that some 15,000 people have been sent to try and help with the rescue effort. Now, dozens, thousands, hundreds of buildings have been destroyed, damaged in many cities in the southeast of Turkey and, of course, across the border in the northwest of Syria. We've got reporters in a number of cities, and they have told us about the devastation that they have seen and the fact that in many places, the specialist equipment, those with the expertise of trying to get people out from collapsed buildings, have yet to arrive. So people, locals, anyone with equipment is being employed to try their best to remove some of the rubble and see if anyone is beneath collapsed buildings. Now, the international community has promised lots of aid and assistance that's come in from all around the world, including aid and rescue teams. Now, the UK is sending 76 search and rescue specialists, including sniffer dogs, to the region. The EU has activated the Copernicus satellite system to help with emergency mapping. India, Japan, South Korea, Israel and Greece have also announced they'll be sending rescue teams, and China has said that it will be giving £5 million in emergency rescue aid. Well, earlier I was able to speak to the Foreign Office Minister Andrew Mitchell about what the UK government's doing to help.
Right, the aid budget is under very considerable strain, but Britain always carves out a certain amount to cope with humanitarian crises. That is what people in Britain expect us to do. Britain is always there first and in strength to help when these appalling catastrophes take place, and we will be there this time. And the humanitarian budget is in a way slightly separate from the steady state international development budget, and it is there specifically to respond to crises like these.
But to be clear, any aid that goes into northwest Syria will have to come through Turkey, through the Cilvagosua crossing border. You're not planning on bringing aid directly into the northwest of Syria?
It's very difficult to get aid in. We will use anything we can to get aid to people who are desperately needed, and we're talking and closely coordinating with the United Nations. But if you look at the geography, the way in is from Turkey. It's over that border, which is very constricted, and that's an additional problem at a desperate time for people who've already suffered so much in northern Syria.
Well, here is more of the devastation that has been wrought by those earthquakes in Turkey. This is the city of Kahramanmaraş, which is a city of some 1.1 million people. And it's always worth remembering when looking at these shots of these cities of devastation that this is a single shot showing perhaps one building that's collapsed. But as we understand from the reporting, the scale of the devastation in Turkey is vast. Whole neighbourhoods have been destroyed. And the Turkish president overnight announced there would be 7 days of mourning. Flags would be flown at half-mast as some 13,000 people have been deployed to try and assist with the rescue operation. Now, this is Diyarbakir, where the rescue effort, of course, continues. Many cities, Sanliurfa, Diyarbakir, Gaziantep, Antakya, Osmaniye, to name but a few in Turkey and across the border in Syria, Aleppo, Latakia, Hama have all been affected by this earthquake. Now, at this point, we understand that some 4,700 people have died, but that number, looking at the scale of the destruction, is certain to rise in the coming days. Now, the first few hours of these kind of disasters are vitally important, and the effort will be, of course, continuing, but with freezing conditions and the difficulty of getting assistance and heavy machinery and expert in pulling people out of rubble into the areas where it's needed. The situation remains very challenging for people both in Turkey and in northern Syria. But the world has decided to send aid and send equipment and send specialists and send money to try and assist both Turkey and Syria in their efforts, just a day on from those major earthquakes. And just to highlight the sense of seismic activity in the region at the moment, another 5.7 magnitude earthquake has just been reported in the last 45 minutes. But the rescue effort continues. Teams, specialists and non-specialists, anyone who is able and willing to help, have been spending the past days combing through rubble of collapsed buildings as thousands came down as a result of those two major earthquakes yesterday. The death toll at the moment stands at 4,700. Unfortunately, it's expected that number will rise. We'll, of course, bring you all the latest on the earthquake throughout the morning.